10, 9.
Hi
8.
there. There's a strange voice in my ear. Let me just mute this thing here. That's better. Hi, my name is Aaron Short. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, now I can see a weird face on my screen. Today is March the 28th. It's Monday. It's time for some gear chat. And we're going to talk about a topic today which is very close to my heart and my wallet, which is how do we amplify our guitars, namely our electric guitars today in 2022. There's so many options out there. It's absolutely crazy. So welcome. If you're new here, please subscribe and ring the bell. We're restreaming, so it'll be live on my channel and my guest channel. So if you like what we're doing, please subscribe and ring the bell for both of our channels. We would really, really appreciate it. If you have a question, let us know in the chat. If you have some comments, please feel free, of course, to chat with each other and send your comments our way as well. Today's an open discussion. I don't think we're going to find an answer today as such. I don't think there's an answer to this question. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but we'll have a good time, a lot of fun discussing it between ourselves. So without further ado, let's bring on today's guest. This is the one and only Dr. McFarland. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, guys. I am here and awake and ready
You're
to
awake.
talk
Well,
gear.
that's good because it's 4 p.m., isn't it? No, it's 3 p.m. where you are, right?
Yeah, but when you have a new baby, it's you never get
Oh.
enough sleep. So
Oh, congratulations. Hey, for anyone that hasn't met you before, are you a doctor of medicine or music? Can you just clarify?
well, Dr. McFarland is a nickname that was given to me by my friend Robbie Russell. I'm sure he don't mind me saying his name. Probably 20 years ago at MTSU, and I heal people with sweet rock and roll, and I get surgical with audio. So therefore, I am the doctor of rock.
So you're more of a tone doctor.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome.
Producing, engineering, creating sweet tones. That's what I do.
Well, I hope today you can prescribe the correct tonal subscription for my problems, Dr. McFarland.
Yes, I do make house calls. So give me a call.
All right, let's say hi to our friends in the chat over here. We have the one and only David Belcher. Says, good afternoon, Aaron and Doc. And we have Lisa. Hey, Lisa, how you doing today? And we have Jim. Jim is anonymous these days. His picture's gone. Hello, Aaron Short Music and all his fans. Wow, thank you. There's at least one fan here, I think. It's back to winter here in Vermont. Temperature in the teens all day with snow flurries. The good news is that this cold snap will recharge the maple tree for sweeter sap. Very good.
And tone wood, right? Sweet tone wood.
Sweet. Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking of the tone as I read that out. Jeffrey's here. Good to see you, Jeffrey. Hi, Aaron. Tuning in from cold and snowy Ohio. Oh dear, I don't like that. I don't want to hear about this snow because I'm on the East Coast. So if that snow is coming this way, I'm going to blow it straight back again. All right. Mark Henry says hi, David. There, everyone's saying hi to each other. Doc is the tone master, says father of 3 kids.
That's right.
Oh, yep. Hey, no pressure today. No pressure. All right.
Hey, I've been doing this for years, Aaron. I got this.
Gary Roberts is here. Long time, my friend. How are you doing? Now, Gary posts a lot of videos about tone and playing electric guitars as well. So I look forward to his contribution today. And Todd is here and says, I ordered a, how do you say this? Seriatone? Cheriatone?
I always said seriatone, but I'm from the South, so I can't speak English anyway, right?
I've ordered one of those amps about a year ago. It's a year ago. Wow. It's shipping soon. I've been playing a long time, and I told Nick I want the 1987 Back for the Attack Lynch tone. I guess as I get older, I just know. Well, that's great. When you know what the product you want, that's the awesome thing. Today, I think we're going to discuss, like, especially from a point of view of a new guitarist, where do you begin? I remember going to the NAMM show in California 2 years ago, or even 3, the one before that, and walking around that main floor and thinking to myself, there's the brass section, there's the drum section, there's a little bit for singers and keyboard players. But my goodness, there's just a million ways to amplify an electric guitar at the NAMM show. And I think that's where we're coming from today. Which one do you choose? Where do you start? Gary's here from sunny Tucson, Arizona. I wish I was there right now. And David says, overcast and 57 in Oregon. Normal spring weather. Where are you, Dr. McFarland? I'm going to call you Doc today, Nathan, or Dr. McFarland. What do you prefer?
I go by all 3 at different times and different mood levels. You can call me Doc, Nathan, whatever.
I'll use all 3. Where are you located?
I am in a town called Murfreesboro, just south of Nashville. I was actually in Smyrna for about 15 years, and we recently got a new house along with a new baby. And have a new studio almost done. I'm going to be moving in my stuff this weekend, so it's going to be cool. But we're in Murfreesboro, the place where everyone wants to move to, apparently. So,
well, congratulations on the baby and the house. I look forward to seeing the new studio as well.
And a new guitar.
Well, as always, right? David says it's the home of Gallagher guitars. Is that where you are or where he is? I'm
probably
not sure.
Where David is.
Todd is here. I run sound for a lot of younger metal bands. If I was new, it'd be a Helix into a small head and a 2x12 cab. All you need. Thank you, Todd. Okay, bye everyone. No, actually, you're on the.
I got nothing else to say after that.
No, he's actually on the kind of. I do agree, but I want to take the long road to this. And a lot, a lot of this depends on your situation. I'm glad you're here, Doc, because what you need from a guitar amplification system, let's say, is different to what I need, and I bet to a lot of people in the chat need as well. And I think a big thing about this is, first of all, deciding what you need, rather than just getting caught up in what you find online or what someone's raving about in a video or what the latest new toy is. What do you actually need to get? And I hope we can figure out the answer to that. I've got a kind of schedule for today just because this is such a huge topic. So as a little intro, I'm sure you saw this as well, Doc. The last 4 weeks that have passed, we saw a new amp, the Line 6 Catalyst.
Yep.
The Boss GX100, their first modeler pedal with a touchscreen, which is kind of exciting and interesting. But yes, another modeler to add to the list of guitar modelers. The Neural DSP Tone King plugin. So this is a plugin you can buy for your computer and then play through your interface and use it with your computer. They've got loads of plugins, and that's their latest one, the Tone King amp. And then Line 6, did you see the, I think you say Metallurgy plugins? So they're kind, right, well, that's kind of like the Neural DSP plugins as well, right? So you run those on your computer. So in the last 4 weeks, that's at least 4 ways of amplifying your guitar. You may have heard of even more than that. I'm sure I've seen some other ones from Nuix and some other companies as well. That's just in the last 4 weeks alone.
It's insane.
And we already had a ton of digital modelers. Like, I know you've got the Head Rush. I've got the HX Stomp and the Helix Floor. I've got the Kemper and the Quad Cortex. I've got way too many to start with. But then there's also the Fractal. There's also, there's other ones you can get that are more affordable. There's the Boss products. I didn't even touch on those. This is the point I'm trying to make. I mean, maybe that's just the problem in the world in general now. Maybe we can say the same thing about guitars and keyboards and microphones. There's just so much of everything. But certainly with the electric guitar world, when I was growing up, we went to the local guitar store in the major city, and they just had basically like a wall of amps and maybe a few digital products, and you would just pick an amp and go home and use it. Now I don't know how anyone would even make a decision. Again, that's what we're going to talk about today. But let's start with our experience then. So no, let's not tell people what you're using now. Let's talk about what your requirements are. I think that's a really important thing. So what do you do musically? Yeah, what do you do? What do you need? What do you need?
Well, in my previous life of playing in a band, this is well before modeling was even popular or even around. There's the Helix had kind of been on the market a little bit, but it was still really brand new. So for me being in a band, I always played with an amplifier, a somewhat decent sized pedal board, usually on my pedal train Fly, and I had a guitar, and I would just show up to the gig. You get on stage, put a microphone in front of the amplifier, and you let the sound guy do his job, and you just try to rock out as much as you can, right? As I've transitioned into the studio world and not playing out in a rock band as much, I've really drawn to, line out type products, as in, any kind of mauler that you can just go line out into an interface and maybe monitor through headphones or studio monitors. And so I'm really just going all digital these days. So if you were to ask me 10 years ago, it would have been a tube amp through a pedal board and a guitar, and that was my requirement. But nowadays in the studio, I feel like the digital realm gets the job done, and in the mix it sounds really great. So that's kind of the two worlds I kind of teeter on there.
So you're recording and using in-ears. So I would say in that respect, the digital stuff seems a really good way to go, because I think
I either got these headphones here or any kind of headphone. I got Ultimate Ear in-ears, and if I'm not monitoring through these, I'm just listening back through studio monitors.
Right. So you're like a prime example of someone that the modelers are great for, like the Kemper, the Head Rush, the Helix, because if you used real tube amps, they would make a noise. Is that siren in my end or your end? Hang on, it's on my end.
Well, you're in New York, so it's probably you, right?
Yeah, that's what I assumed. If you use the tube amp, it's going to make a sound. You have to mic it up. That sound is going to spill out into the room, And if you're playing on like a church stage, a silent stage, or recording, you might not want that. And the digital options are really good now. They're all using the latest impulse responses and things like that. They're sounding really good. So I think for you, that makes total sense to do that. Okay, here's a question then. Do you miss, a lot of people talk about the feel and the cool factor of having the tube amp in the room and the sound of it. Do you miss that or not at all?
90% of me playing is just through studio monitors. So I've gotten very, very used to it. But that does not mean that, wait, let me get my thing here. Let me get my thing. That does not mean I miss it. Or I don't miss it. So I've recently picked up, if you can see this, this is the Supro Delta 12 and Delta King 12. And when I played it in the store, that feeling that you get from playing with a tube amp in a room came rushing back to me. And I was like, man, this sounds really good. And it has a line out and it has a power amp in, so I can still utilize modeling through the amp if I want. But if I just want to take a guitar and plug it straight into the amp, just kind of turn up the reverb and just play, I mean, wow, it sounds great. So nothing will ever replace, to me, an amp in the room sound, because you feel the energy from that. And that's where modeling lacks in certain ways, because listening back through studio monitors is not the same experience as the tube amp in the room, and it's bouncing around the walls and hitting your ears at different points, and all that stuff that we feel and get from an amp in the room sound. Does that make sense?
Well, let's just explain, in case we've got people here that are completely new to all this, because these are things that took me a long time to get my head around as well. When you play something like a Helix through a PA system, what you're hearing is an amp model, so they've recreated the amp itself, and also an impulse response or a cab. On the Helix, I like to use impulse responses. Actually, I like impulse responses in general. I think they can sound better than some cab modeling, although some cab modeling is now getting a lot better as well. It's all IRs, basically. It's all impulse responses. But that essentially is replacing the microphone. So what you're hearing is the amp and the microphone in front of the cab through a PA system, which is full range. But when you hear a guitar amp in the room, you're hearing the guitar cabinet, which is actually chopped off a lot, isn't it? You're hearing a lot of the mid-range. You're not hearing a lot of extreme highs or lows. Yeah. And that's why when you run those impulse responses through a real cab, you should turn the impulse response off, because what you end up hearing is
always
not the same thing. So yeah, so that's important. See, I'm completely opposite. I grew up playing in a band in London, and I had an orange amp. Now I will throw these things in here as well. I remember I had a lot of issues with that amp. I'm not sure if it was the amp or the pedal board, but that rig gave me a lot of problems over the years, and I never really figured out what it was. And eventually I just sold it at a loss and got rid of it. But I used that amp, and we just played very loud, and louder than we should have done, and that's just the way it was. I remember the other guitarist I worked with used the Pod Bean because it was convenient, and he would just rock up, plug in, and go. Now, what I'll say about him...
And it's consistent, too.
It's
right?
consistent.
The sound is the same every night.
But I want to say... Just throw this in here. He was and is a really great musician, and when you're that good, I'm not being funny, but when you're that good, it's kind of like, well, he's so good. I'm not thinking about the tone. In fact, I'm not really thinking about tone at all for the audience. I'm thinking about it for me, and I like to have that tube amp. Having said that, sometimes the bands can be so, like a 12-piece band can be so loud and busy that you don't even really hear the amp. It can get buried. And what you get in your apartment can be very different to what you hear on stage. I think it's also important to select the gear for the place you're going to play at as well. Because I audition all my stuff in the apartment, which is ridiculous because I can't turn it up. I need to take it out. I'm hoping soon to go to like a studio to actually, or a band room, to actually play in a band and audition some of the things I have there to decide what I'm going to keep and what I'm going to sell on. So I think the context and the use case is important. But a lot of people I talk to say to me, oh, just use in-ears. But, the band scene in New York is kind of a little bit old school. You're expected to take an amp. You're expected to have on-stage sound. even though they're using in-ears now at some gigs, they just mic the amp up. So a lot of people that play on a church stage will use the modelers and use in-ears exclusively. But in New York, you're kind of expected to have an amp. And I think that's my case.
Yeah, and this is a, FR 108 speaker. And does this sound exactly like a tube amp in a room? No. It still doesn't. But it does amplify your modeler pretty well. I mean, it gives you a good sound in the room, and everyone in the band can hear you just fine. But once again, it's just a different beast.
Well, okay, now here's something else to factor in, though. What if our worlds collided and I showed up with a tube amp, which has that very mid-focused amp in the room sound, and you showed up with that, which we just explained is the sound of the mic through the cabinet through the microphone. So it's not going to be as direct. It can never be as direct, can it? Because you're hearing a microphone recording, not the actual amp itself. If we both showed up at the same gig, would that be a problem, do you think? Like, would my amp overpower the PA speaker?
Well, it's strange because let's just say you're at a medium-sized club, right? Where your sound guy is actually going to mic your amp anyway. And so the amp is on the back of the stage. You're on the front of the stage. And now he's piping your mic'd up amp back through the foldback monitor, right? So essentially the 108 speaker is kind of doing the same thing as a stage monitor would there in front of you. But the only difference is you're still hearing a little bit of that amp on the stage sound coming from behind you, and then the foldback coming up at you from the floor. So, and my sound is still just almost secondary. It's like a secondhand sound because it's not a direct sound from the amp in the room. It's a amp in the room that's being mic'd, and now you're hearing that through a speaker. So I think we would still be able to hear each other and still have a good time playing. But I think the immediacy of your amp will be just a little bit more pronounced in the room than an FR speaker would.
And imagine if I had like a 4x12 and a 100-watt tube head. Like that could potentially just. Then again, you've got that other thing of. Yeah. But then you've got the other thing of maybe straight away the venue owner or the sound engineer will come over and say, "Hey, turn it down," and then you're just basically back to where you started anyway.
At a certain point, they start evening out. Once you get the tube amp down to a really low volume, now the FR speaker is more has a little bit more advantage, I think, because you can pipe it through the PA and they can control your sound more. But you're still getting the tone that you want because everything's modeled in the modeler, and your tube amp doesn't zing. It doesn't have that life because the power tubes aren't cooking and all that stuff that a tube amp wants to do when it's at a decent volume. And if you're starving the volume there, it just doesn't respond the same. I think that's why attenuators and like power soak options on more high-end amplifiers are there, so you can still crank the front end and then just turn it down on the backside and get a little bit of the juice that you want, just at a lower volume. Well, that's why people have like an aux box and all that kind of different stuff. The cap direct.
I've only tried the Captor and the aux. People tell me that there's good and bad attenuators, and apparently like the Sur is one of the best ones. But for me, you're still playing at the lower volume. Yeah, you can get more distortion and more drive from the tubes, but you're still at a lower volume. Again, I think if you live in an apartment, you might want to go digital with the in-ears just because you can't annoy the neighbor. Like if the minute you turn on the amp, your neighbor's banging on the door, which actually doesn't happen here yet, but if that's what happens to you, maybe you don't need a tube amp. Maybe you need the thing that you can use with in-ears. For years I hated playing electric guitar through these headphones because I felt like my head was right next to the speaker, which essentially it is because you're hearing like that IR microphone right there. But after doing the live streaming on here over the last 2 years, I now am very... It's amazing how your ears can adjust And now I'm really used to that sound. I have no problem with using the in-ears at all.
Well, just
You got to
think
get used
about
to
when
it.
you're on. Just think about when you're on tour with a band.
Yeah.
More likely than you are using in-ears on stage.
Yes.
So having your amp behind you and cranked up and stuff, yeah, it might be fun for the audience, but you're not getting all that excitement. You might feel a little air on the back
Feel
of
it,
your leg,
yeah. You
but
might
you're
feel
not
it, yeah.
getting the immediacy because you're
Yeah.
still wearing in-ears. So that's why they kind of start evening out once you put yourself in a certain situation.
Yes.
And that's why modeling can be just as good as plugging into an amp because you're essentially hearing the same thing in your ears.
But again, that's the usage case that people need to decide. Like, if you told me I'm going on tour next week and we're using in-ears only, I would take something like a Quad Cortex and set my patches up in that. But if you told me next week I'm playing one of my gigs here in New York with a wedding band, I would have a completely different mindset. Okay, I'm going to take a tube amp. What tube amp should I take? And then you can also do something like where you put the two together. Like Pete Thorne said on his last tour, he took his signature amp and the Quad Cortex and ran them together as a hybrid setup. So that's what you can also do. You can also bring the two things together and make a hybrid combination as well.
Because his amp has an IR loader built into it.
Built in, yeah.
And per preset, he can change the IR that's playing out of that head. So I can't remember how much that thing is, but I guess for him it's worth it because you're getting the real tube amp feel.
Yeah.
But then the convenience of the output being an IR, and not having to have an amp load and all that stuff. So,
well,
I'd be interested in trying out his amp for sure.
That I have tried that. That's his signature amp. So it's obviously made for him. So it's completely tailored to him. But it's not affordable. And okay, it has the IRs. It's only that the 15 is only 15 watts, which isn't. I'd be happier around kind of 20 to 30, I think. I personally think the more watts, the better. Yeah, for me. But then again, it's going to get heavier and more expensive too. Let's see what people are saying here. Todd says, I dig the plugins and have a lot, but it's more about what you want to achieve. Exactly, that's what we're just talking about. Play live or internet star. Well, not just internet star. I mean, obviously, a lot of people play the guitar for TikTok and Instagram. But the thing you said about recording, like I completely agree with that. If you sent me a recording with your head rush, we did it last week, didn't we? The head rush or the Amp X, another one, Amp X. Amp 1. If you do that, I don't think I could tell you. Another guy posted last week the new Neural DSP plugin versus the amp, and I did get it right, but I wasn't certain. Like, it was so close, right? That's really hard to tell. But in the room, I can tell.
Imperial Tone King.
Yeah, someone posted that comparison with the real amp. And there was, what it was is there was something missing for me, but who knows if that was just the two amps they used or the recording or whatever. It was really, really close. So I think I can agree with you on that. For the recording and the direct and everything, we've hit this benchmark now. I don't think it's 1-to-1, but it's good enough. But in the room,
how many number one hits in the last year was recorded with the Kemper?
But does that make it okay?
Well, can you tell the difference?
Well,
if nobody ever told you, you just heard the song.
How many?
Wow, that song sounds great. It's like, yeah, it does, and it was recorded on a Kemper.
But let me throw it back to you. How many number one hits in the last year had an electric guitar on them anyway?
Okay, you got me there.
Bebo says, my requirements include a 50-watt Marshall head and a 4x12 with greenback, so the Trainer American Standard for acoustic. So there you go. You see a 50-watt amp with a 4x12 cab. Hi,
and he has
Alan,
a Roadie as well.
And the Roadie to carry it. That's the thing, isn't it? Right. This stuff is all great until you actually have to carry it. Again, these weddings I talk about, sometimes you have to park like 10-minute walk from the tent and it's raining and the ground is muddy. So carrying a 50-pound amp, and then it's horrible. But then once it's on stage, it's nice. But actually, the load, you got to think about the loading too. Or the one we showed up to where it was 5 flights of stairs, and the bass player brought like a 60-pound head. And that night, I actually said to him, "Don't bother, just plug into the PA." Just go
Seriously.
straight into PA. And it was fine.
It's gonna
It
sound
was a
just
small
fine.
gig. Yeah.
And it's going to save your back too.
Now, did he have as much fun? Maybe not. But that was a real, I was like, if you're going to carry up those stairs, you might injure yourself. So
He's a bass player. He didn't need to have fun.
Todd says, I've run a Helix and a Kemper direct in live. It's good, no doubt, but still missing something. I hear that a lot. And Gary's got a good point here. I've heard so many guitarists who switch from tube amps to modelers and go back to tube amps. I think that happens because the modelers came along and said, hey, you can have everything in one and save the money and save your back. And everyone tried it. But I think a lot of people, not everyone, a lot of people use the modeling now for sure. Again, especially with the in-ears. But I think I've heard of a lot of people that have gone back to amps as well, as I've done. Now, I want to throw this in. I think I did things backwards. I do a lot of acoustic shows, and I didn't play electric for many years. And when I got back into electric, the whole thing was like the Helix Facebook groups and how wonderful the Helix is and how you can sell all your amps. So I went into Helix. But if I'm being completely honest, I did use it for some shows, and it was fine. But if I'm being completely honest today, for many years, I just spent a lot of time tweaking and trying to find something to connect with. The minute I got the tube amp in here, which was a few years later, it all kind of just came together. Like sometimes, or a lot of the time, I'll just plug an electric guitar straight into an amp with some reverb and play. Yeah. And I am very, 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 very happy with that sound. And I spent a lot of time trying to get that sound from the modelers, and I could never get it. And I think that's worth considering. Also, I want to give a shout out. Have you tried the Oxbox? That thing is legit. It's really, really,
I
really
haven't.
good.
It's a little out of my price range for what I do.
When I got mine, it was much cheaper. They've gone up hundreds of dollars the last 2 years. But even at the current price, if you're watching this, I really recommend it. I never reviewed it for whatever reason. I will do one day, but it just does one thing really well. It takes your tube amp, it makes it silent, and the cabs in there with the headphones in just sound really... Okay, I'm not going to say it sounds like you're playing the amp in the room. Obviously, that's not the point of it, and it's not possible. But for me, it's the most satisfying thing. And I think it's because they use 2 mics and stereo delays. Everything's in stereo. Everything just sounds very big and rich. And
you get a good width sound.
The width, yeah. And it has like a room mic you can blend in too. So if you own a few tube amps and you want to get into recording, I think that's a great kind of hybrid way to get into it. But then I wouldn't take it out live because the thing is like this big. So again, it's bulky, right?
Unless you had like a good carry bag or something with it.
But then that's another thing to take. It's all a great idea, isn't it? And then you've actually got to walk out the door. And the thing with me is I take PA as well. So once I've got to take 4 PA speakers, a big bag of cables, a mixer, and the guitar rig, that changes everything for me. It's just so much stuff,
And your arms are already about to fall off. So by the time you set everything up, like you're too tired to play.
Yeah. Danielle says, I've been tuning into Smalls Live on YouTube an evening. Every act there uses the same drum kit, same Fender amp, and same piano. Cool. Okay.
Smalls Live. Okay.
I didn't really want to get into this today because everyone's talking about this right now, but Gary says with the tube shortages due to the Russian sources drying up, will modelers get more mind share and become more prevalent? I mean, I haven't spoke about this at all because I just feel like we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, and maybe the tubes will all disappear and we'll be forced to. But when I heard that, Doc, I was thinking to myself, oh, should I start buying tubes? Oh, is that a reason to forget the tube amp? No, that's not it at all. It's too soon, right? It's too soon. I don't think that's a reason to base your purchasing decision today. I was looking at tube amps today. I don't think that's a reason to base your purchasing decision today. I don't think we should panic buy or freak out about that. But maybe in 100 years, like with cars, we will all be digital. But then again, the technology will be even better by then, won't it? So
yeah,
who knows? I want to base this chat on what we have available today. Lee's at work. Can't get out of working tonight. It won't be around much. Sorry to hear that, Lee. Mark says, work hard to buy more guitars and amplifiers. Don't forget the amplifiers today.
Gotta have that.
Everyone's saying the same thing, which I find interesting. I love these chats because I love what we get from the people in the chat. David says, I use the FRFR 108 with my Origin Effects Revival drive and 2 notes cab amp. Sounds good, but doesn't feel like a tube amp. We hear that a lot as well. Doesn't feel the same. Doesn't feel the same.
It's
Doesn't
just a
sound
different
quite the same.
feeling. It's like when
Different
I'm
thing, right?
monitoring back through my studio monitors,
Mm.
it sounds good. It does, but it doesn't feel the same. But for me, if the guitar is in a mix in my DAW, you're just hearing back a mix. It didn't have to feel like a tube amp because it sounds good in the mix.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Completely different thing, right? Mixing
Completely
a song.
different.
Yeah. Again, that's that whole mic'd guitar cab sitting in a mix of a song is completely different to guitar amp on a loud stage fitting into a band. I think we need to remember, we need to separate those two things, I think. Right. Definitely.
But if you're on a stage with in-ears, you are getting a mix in your ears. So it's the same mix, whether you're in the studio or on the stage.
Right.
But if you're not using in-ears on stage, that's where the difference comes in.
Right.
Because you can hear a little bleed from the other drums and the other guitar player on the other side of the stage. You're hearing your amp kind of behind you. And all the sound is just kind of swarming around.
Yeah.
You know, but when you only have a stereo in-ear system, then that's all you got.
Which can also be bad because what if the other guitarist is too loud? What if you know with the in-ears you can actually do your own mix now, can't you, on your phone? You can mix your own kind of studio sound in your head. Yeah, let's keep those things separate. And I totally agree with that. Recording or playing on stage with in-ears versus playing going to the blues jam, everyone's playing acoustic instruments. I think if you're going to be playing with acoustic bands, you need to have an actual monitor. You know, it's funny because for years it was all about you can buy these digital pedals and throw away your amps, sell your amps, right? But they didn't give us a way to amplify them. That was always my thing with those things. Like, okay, Helix, okay, it's all here. How do you amplify it? Then they brought out the power cab, right? So, here's the way you amplify it. Or now there's all these like solutions like the Red Sound and the Atomic and the Head Rush. Now we're getting a million ways of how to amplify those modelers. Now, here's the one thing I always say to people. If you're going to end up having a Helix floor, which is a big pedal, and a 212 Helix power cab, right? And you're only going to use 2 tones, I think at that point, why wouldn't you just get a good tube amp and a couple of pedals?
Right.
So that's my thing with that. Again, what do you actually need? What do you actually need from these things?
I recently saw a very short clip of Mark Tremonti showing off his live rig, and he has a PRS Archon and a Mesa Boogie dual rec, you know, both heads in a rack with 2 4x12 cabs, and he just has one of those MIDI switching units like a Bradshaw or something like that, and he has one button for clean. And the Mesa Boogie turns off, and it's just the Archon on the clean channel. And then he hits another button for his dirt sound, and the Archon switches over to the dirt channel, and also the Mesa Boogie comes into the channel. So you got the 2 amps stacked, you know, really huge fat sound. And then for his lead, he has the Tube Screamer.
Yeah. And
that's his sound. When you go see Mark Tremonti live, you're hearing those 2 amps and a Tube Screamer, and that's it. He don't have any other gimmicks or any other gadgets or anything else going on. And then for him, it worked. I mean, obviously he's somewhat big, has a big name, and has a full crew that can carry all that stuff around. But hey, wouldn't it be great to carry around 2 amp heads and 2 cabs and just have a amp switcher, and there's your sound, you know. But for the rest of us who can't, you know, doesn't have that convenience, we buy the Helix, we buy the whatever, so we can have the convenience of switching different sounds. Or maybe you just have a small tube amp, maybe a 50 watt, 30 to 50 watt amp, and you got a small pedal board that you can do some basic switching on. There's different ways to scale that down for sure. So it doesn't mean you have to go modeling in order to get that convenience. But I think that's why some people do go into the modeler for live use.
I think
maybe they can use a Mesa Boogie for their dirt sound and a Fender Twin for the clean, but they don't have to carry the amps. It's just all built in to the
I totally think it's convenience because you're saving the weight. You've got a ton more options. You've got all the effects built in. You've got a direct sound to send to PA. I'm kind of the mindset though of I don't really care myself about having 1,000,000 amp sounds. I just want like a clean that's great. I want a drive that's great and a heavy that's great. I don't need like 1,000,000 sounds. And what it's funny, like with the Kemper, what I tend to do is load up a profile that I quite like and shape it. And if I then compare that to one of like my amp or something, that sounds the same. It's like my ears dial that thing into what I'm looking for. So I don't really need the personality of all different amps and things. And I also like the simplicity. I like the lack of options too. And I'm actually guilty of kind of laughing when people say, oh, like the XFX stuff is too complicated. There's too many options in there. Sometimes I'll think to myself, well, how can that be a bad thing? More options is a good thing. It's better than having like an amp where you need to add an EQ in the loop or something. Like it's all there. But I have spent many nights programming and downloading and buying presets and IRs that I just never used. And then, like I said, I then plugged straight into an amp that I like and just played for hours. And I think that's got to be a factor as well. Gary's like me, says, in terms of amps on stage, I usually go for reasonable stage volume and don't generally need monitor support on stage. So yeah, that's like me. If I can just have the amp on stage, then that's what I'm hearing.
Right.
Oh,
that's good.
David still has a 100-watt head and two 4x12s. Nice. But he's glad I don't have to pack those. He's glad he hasn't got to pack those around like we did in the 80s.
It looks good in the living room, though, doesn't it, David? You got your big screen TV with two half stacks on the other side.
He hasn't got a living room. He's got a 100-watt head and two 4x12.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. The Fryer adds a loop to a non-loop older amp. Hey, Real Ting. So Real Ting's who got me into Kemper. He's used one for years. Yep. And he just got the stage, and he says at church every week he uses in-ears, and the Kemper sounds with that. And I don't doubt it. Again, that's that usage where you're using in-ears and something like a Kemper or a Head Rush or a Quad Cortex. One of the latest modelers. I think they all do can sound great. We've all heard the demos online. We've all heard the videos where you hear the two together. And okay, and if you say you can hear a difference, they're very, 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 very close.
Very, very close, yeah.
Rick says, no one needs a tube amp in an apartment. But being said that, I'm using a DSL-40 in the apartment. I totally agree with you. No one needs a tube amp in the apartment anymore with these plugins and these digital things. But there's still, like we said, something about playing through it. Even at low volume, it still has this kind of...
I have a very short story, Aaron, that I like to tell the audience here. So I've told you this before, but I think at this point in my life, I've owned about 34, maybe 35 amps.
Wow.
Some tubes, some solid state. I still have my little pig nose amp. This is the first amp I've ever got, which is a custom K solid state amp. I got this in an acoustic guitar. But anyway, that's all neither here or there. I've owned a lot of amps over the years, okay? When I bought at Guitar Center, this is probably 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. I bought my 2x12 cab, which I still have, and I bought a Bassman head. I think it was like from the 70s, like maybe a 73, maybe a 77, somewhere in there. A 70s model, silver face Bassman head. At the time, I was living in an apartment, and I was like, I got to rock, folks. I just got to do it now. So I made sure that the downstairs neighbor wasn't home, kind of made sure nobody else was around. And I literally cranked it up to 10 in my small apartment and just played like AC/DC and Led Zeppelin for like an hour. And thankfully, nobody was home, and thankfully, nobody called the cops. But that was a joyous experience. So if you do live in an apartment and you want to crank it up, do it with caution. So that way you don't spend the night in jail.
It depends on the apartment. Used to be on the top floor, and the lady below us would complain that because the amp was obviously vibrating on the floor. Now there's a garage below us, this concrete floor. So it's very
Cool.
different. And there's different options. I mean, like I said, the Oxbox is great. You can buy those enclosures. You put your amp inside, and it makes it quiet, right? And you put a mic in front of it. And there's things that you can do. Yeah, Gary said a lot of us gig in local bars where amps. I guess you could say where amps are needed. Yeah. And Todd says we have a set of in-ears that also have mics on, so you can hear them. Yeah, I've heard. Pete Thorne was talking about those.
Oh, that's cool.
In-ear monitors with a mic control, so you can bring in the outside sound as well.
Yeah, the ambient sound. That's neat.
So you don't feel like you're in a fishbowl. Yeah, I'd like to try those. Real Ting says thinks the Kemper sounds great through the PA too, and is a lot easier to bring around and keep consistent. So my only question for you, Real Ting, then is you're the guitarist in the wedding band, and you're playing with keys and vocalists and drummers. Do you think if a guitarist came along with a tube amp at your next show for a dual guitar gig, do you think it'd be a potential issue or not? Like mixing the two together. Now let's talk about the solid state thing, because I've tried a lot. I must have tried 10 solid state solutions, and I didn't really like any of them. Honestly, I've liked some more than others. Some I absolutely thought were terrible. Some I thought were acceptable. But overall, I've been pretty unimpressed by the solid state stuff, which is a shame because that is a nice lightweight option alternative to tubes, right? But I just have not. It's not like in my head, because I'm guilty sometimes of auditioning gear with my brain. Like, oh, it's not a 2-rock tube amp or a vintage Fender. It's not going to sound the same. Sometimes I really try to tune out and kind of almost forget what I plugged into and just really get into the music. And I find that a bit, I don't know, there's something missing for me. I do like the amp one. It's probably the best thing I've tried, but that's got a tube in it, interesting enough.
And it's in the power section and not the preamp section.
Right. So that is like a power tube, right? So maybe that's what it is about that thing. That thing really impresses me. So again, especially for the size, but you've got to add other stuff to it.
Yeah, what's happening with the amp one is you got the preamp, which is solid state, which is basically like a drive pedal, right? Like a little small pedal going through the amp. And then it's going through the tube. And then you have a 100-watt Class D power section after that. That is just amplifying the whole thing. So it's not like just a tube in a circuit that's just kind of glowing for effect. Exactly. All the circuitry is going through the tube first, and then it's being amplified by the Class D technology or Class D power amp. That's no different from like a PA speaker. Speaking of Class D quilter amps, which I know you've tried at least one or two. I've owned 6 or 7 quilter amps over the years, starting back in like 2014 or so. And they're good amps. They really, really are. And if you want something that's lightweight and just sounds, I mean, it does sound pretty great to me. Quilter is a great option for that. But as we know, it doesn't have any tubes in it. And if you're really searching for that tube sound, maybe Quilter doesn't get you all the way there. But for a lot of people, it is close enough for a good lightweight, loud option.
I've heard great things about Quilter, including from you, but I really did not like it at all. And I don't really know why. And the other thing is, I had the power amp that was plugged into their cab, and sometimes it's the cab as well. This is an important thing to mention. It's not just tube amps, it's also what they're plugged into. Because I've tried the small Mesa make a little 1x10 Mark 525, and I thought, wow, that'd be a great option for me. I can take it on the subway and stuff. I didn't like it at all. I think because the box is so small, it just sounds really small. And the Kemper cab is the same. They're using a very small, thin enclosure, and it just sounded small to me. I've tried all this stuff, and maybe that was the same with the Quilter. Maybe I didn't like what it was plugged into. So for me, that's fine for what it is, but that wasn't what I'm looking for.
And what's interesting is the Tone Block 202 has an FR mode on it.
Yeah.
That you can plug your Helix or whatever modeler into, and then you can amplify it that way, which is perfectly fine, and it's a viable option. but at this point, I just have the micro. Is it the micro block?
The little
Whatever it
tiny
is.
ones. They're pretty cool. They're
The
pretty
little
cool.
pedal size
Yeah,
micro
yeah.
block.
I
No,
tried one of those
Interblock.
too.
It's the Interblock 45. Sorry, my mind
Yeah.
left me there for a second. I've owned 30 something odd amps. I can't remember all of them. But the only quilter I have left is that Interblock 45, and it's a 33 watt little head that fits on your pedal board, and it does sound really good. And it, plug in any cab you want and rock out. But 90% of the time, I'm just sitting here at my desk recording and listening through studio monitors. So, I mean, yes, I just bought a Super O tube amp. It's more nostalgic than anything. But do I need it? Probably not. I mean, I'm fine with my head rush and my I do have an HX Stomp that I use a little bit. But really, it's the head rush into an interface coming back out through studio monitors. And that's just what I do. If I played live in a band, maybe I would have kept the quilter just for the lightweight, the convenience, and
Look at this one.
whatever.
I tried this one. I actually didn't mind this one, especially for the size. For the size. But again, to me, it's just like another kind of backup, another kind of band-aid. You know, I'm personally kind of tired of looking for the thing. I've got a backup. I've got one of those fly rig, the Tech 21 fly rigs.
Those are great.
No, I wouldn't. I don't want
straight into a PA. Those are great.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to do a gig with it. I hope I never have to use it.
No, as a backup though.
But as a backup,
it's a good lightweight option for sure.
Because actually, the reason that's a great backup is it fits in the guitar case, so it's always in the guitar case and in the gig bag, and it's got enough on there to get through a gig. And I did use it one night where it rained, and I took the Helix, and it was raining, so I put everything away, and I put that thing straight into one PA speaker for the audience, and I did a whole band gig. And it was fine. So that's a great, I think a backup needs to be truly, truly portable like that and robust. But I want part of today's video is because right now I'm trying to decide what do I want to sell? What do I want to keep? And I don't really want my decision to be like a compromise. I want to get something that does what I need it to do and makes me very satisfied, if that's actually possible, like all in one.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, I've really enjoyed the Quad Cortex for the size of it and the way it sounds direct. So I'm thinking I want to plug that into a tube amp, because clearly I like tube amps, right? I think I want to plug that into the effects return of a tube amp and have that as my rig. So I haven't got a big pedal board. I haven't got loads of patch cables to go wrong. I've just got that thing, and that can go direct to front of house, and then the amp can be behind me, basically for me, just to give me that sense of the tube amp. So I think I am going to end up going for like a hybrid kind of rig, purely because it'll be really light and it'll be very light and flexible. So if you're doing a cover song and you need a chorus, you can just throw a chorus on for that song and do it.
So I know because I know what you have a little bit. You have a Princeton tube amp, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't have an effects loop on it. So that wouldn't be a good solution for your
it's very low power and there's no effects return. So I think the Princeton is not a good option for what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So what other what else are you thinking about then?
Well, I'll show you what I've been looking at today. I've actually been speaking to a few friends about this too, and it's funny, again, coming from those groups where everyone's just saying, "Oh, this is all you need." Don't need that. A lot of people I talk to do kind of have this thing as well. It's like, what do I get, right? What do I buy is the biggest question, and kind of sticking to it too. Yeah. I'm looking at one of these. I'll bring it on the screen. Hang on, and I'll tell you why I think this is a good option. And I haven't tried it. This is a Dr. Z. Now, I owned the Dr. Z Plus, and I really liked it. But that was a 15-watt amp with a passive effects loop. Yeah. This amp here, and bear in mind, I've never even played it, but this is a 30-watt tube amp with an active buffered. What's you got mic issues? It's got a buffered effects loop, and it's 30 watts, and it weighs 34 pounds, and it's a 1x12 tube amp combo. Yeah. And also, if I decide I don't want to use the Quad Cortex and I want to use my pedal board, I can just go into it like a tube amp and just use the use it as a tube amp. So I think I'm leaning towards something like this. Grab that thing, grab the quad cortex, which is really small and really light, almost too small in a way, and just go in and have like this hybrid option. And if one of the two goes down, I can use the other one as the backup.
I'm going to throw a small wrench in there, Aaron.
Okay.
You may want to consider this Supro Delta King.
Okay.
It only costs $650. So it's, less than half of the prices of that Dr. Z. It doesn't have an effects loop, but it does have, you can look on Sweetwater right now. They're up there, the Supro Delta Kings. It does have a power amp in. So it's the exact same signal path as what a effects loop return would be doing.
This one?
Yeah, that one right there. I got mine for $650 because I'm cool like that at Corner Music. But
well, they have one for $595, so I could be even cooler than you today.
I know, right? Well, there you go. But nice. Well, you still gotta do tax and shipping and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, no, the shipping's free, but tax.
Okay, power amp in, yeah.
Yeah, power amp in. And I've already done this with my head rush. It sounds great going through that power amp in, and you're bypassing the circuitry in there. So you're just using it as a power amp, getting the tubes cooking pretty good there. And this thing is very lightweight, very small. But to me, it's a good mixture between a Blues Junior and a Princeton Reverb. But you don't get any of the boxiness that you would get from a Blues Junior type amp. Most Princetons sound pretty open sounding, but they can sound small.
Okay.
Because most Princetons have a 10-inch speaker, not a 12-inch speaker. This mic is being retarded today. But yeah, I would consider that Supro.
Well, I like this.
That's the doctor's orders right there.
The doctor's order is £28, so that's great.
Yeah,
it's only 15 watts, but that's okay. 15 watts is okay for the personal monitoring, I think. The power amp in is nice, which I guess is just the effects. I assume it's buffered then. If it's a power amp in, it must be buffered,
possibly.
Right? I'm guessing. I'd have to figure that out.
And but it does have a line output. Price is good. So you can still record with it if you want to. With that line output, it doesn't have a cab sim on it, so you can run that through your aux box.
Oh, that's nice.
The cab sim stuff, but still get the juice from the amp.
Okay, and if the quad cortex goes down, you can use the. Oh, it's got reverb too. Yeah, this is a much better deal.
That's really why I got it. I'm really sorry about this mic.
Can you get a new mic from Sweetwater and call me back?
Yeah, probably.
Hang on, let me see what the review. Oh, 7 reviews. Let me see what they say. Very pleased. Perfect living room amp. Delta King 12. They make a 10 as well. I saw. Yeah,
they make an 8 and a 10 and a 12.
Don't they also make an amp which is for modelers, or is that this one? I thought it was another one they made.
Last year, I had the Supro Custom 10, which is the Keeley Custom 10. It was a Pigtronics and Robert Keeley mashup. And what's cool about the Supro Delta King is it has a Pigtronics overdrive circuit built in. You just like flip a switch and it turns on, and it sounds like a Pigtronics pedal, which I've owned plenty of those in the past. And so it's a cool option, and you can have a amp switcher, so you can go between clean and overdrive. So it's kind of like a 2-channel amp if you kick in, and it also has a boost on it as well. The only issue is there's not really a volume knob for the boost or for the pedal side. So you kind of just get what you get with that, but it's just for a basic clean amp that you're gonna run a Mahler through anyway. I think for the price and the features, and it looks great. I think the black and tan, racing stripe kind of look is really cool. And plus too, my price range for really anything is around either from $500 to $1,000. If I can't get an amp or a guitar within that range, it's usually too much for me. That's why the Head Rush was good for me. Because the Head Rush is about $1,000. A gig board is about $650. HX Stomp is about $650, $700. So it's a good price range for me to stay in.
That was actually my next point on the list. My next point on the list was budget, because it's so easy. There's single channel tube amps that cost $5,000. There's modelers that cost $3,500. What that was. I should put this further up the list. Maybe like, what is the budget to spend on this rig as well?
Yeah, I'm moving my mic around here. That's got to be up to you and up to each individual. It's like, what if this is a hobby for you? Do you want a really expensive hobby, or do you want a hobby that your wife or significant other can, support? It's like, you came home with a 2000 what again? It's like, oh geez, it's like we're trying to pay the rent and the mortgage and the light bill and baby food, whatever else. Is like, you got to decide what that pain level is. And like for me, it's that $500 to $1,000 range. If I can get it anything within there, I'm good. I don't feel too bad about spending the money. But if it's like $1,500, $1,800, closer to $2,000, like, I don't know if I can swing that.
I think my thought is the whole thing of like getting something that's really good to stop me wanting to get more stuff. But also, I don't want to get anything that's too fancy, because remember, again, take this back to the usage case for me. What was it? Weddings. Do you really want to take a $5,000 hand-wired American tube amp to a wedding? No. Because the minute I get a scratch on it, I'm going to be like... So the thing you showed me is interesting. I might actually try that before getting too attached. Because the thing is, everything is out of stock everywhere right now anyway. There's no Dr. Z amps around anywhere. There's no Two Rocks anywhere. Everything's amazing how stuff is still sold out. But these Supros are around, so I may give that a try on your recommendation. And if I do, I'll let you know how it goes. But that price is good, because $700 is like, well, if the worst happened and a guest at a wedding broke it, I'm out $700. Whereas if you get something like a Two Rock, do you really want to be out $3,000 if something happens?
Yeah.
How much are you making from the gig? Is it worth it? No, I mean, even a $700 amp is maybe not worth it, but that might be a good sweet spot. Now, if I could find one of them used, because I put down here as well, new or used, a used one of those, if I could find one of those for like $500, maybe that's the best way to go for this live application. Now, of course, if you're recording in a studio, if you're at home, you're never leaving the house, and you want to spend $3,000 on the Two Rock, and get an aux box for another $1,500. If you've got the money and you want that, and it'll satisfy you and keep you happy the rest of your life, maybe that's worth doing. But I think sometimes I've forgotten about gigs. Sometimes I've got some nice gear together and gone to leave. It's not until you leave the apartment to go to the gig that you then think to yourself, oh, or even worse, when you get to the gig and you're again walking through those muddy fields. Like, I've got my new gig case and my new guitar and my new amp, and I'm walking through a load of mud and I have to set up on a dusty old stage. You're right, it's not worth it. So if this is for heavy use at gigs, I think getting used, something like that used Supro would be perfect, wouldn't it?
Right.
Absolutely perfect.
Because you want to think about, all right, how much money am I going to get from this gig?
Yeah.
And if I just bought this new amp, modeler, guitar, whatever it is, how many gigs do I have to play for that to pay off?
That's a really, really good point. Yeah.
What's your rate of return on that?
Yeah.
Because really at the end, if you're not really a hobbyist, but if you're doing this to make a living, it's you're really making an investment. You're investing into your gear. You're investing back into yourself, making sure you have good gear so it doesn't break down on you at a gig and get embarrassed and whatever else. So what is the rate of return on your money?
Yeah. Well, you have to enjoy it. You have to. I've always said, like my acoustic rig, I'm not prepared to take $100 acoustic guitar with a cheap pickup to play my cover gig. I need to get a tone that I enjoy for the 4 hours that I'm playing. At the same time, I'm not going to take a one-off custom Martin, I'm not. Because there's always that time when they want to use the mic or sing or play the guitar, And for that reason, I always carry like a spare mic, and I don't want to. And that could make or break the gig, right? The owner of the club could say, "Richard, I'd love to play a song on your guitar." And if I'm like, well, I'm not willing to let you because it's a $10,000 one-off Martin. I mean, that'd be terrible. That'd be like, well, you're not coming back here again. So you're right. Is again,
Right.
choosing the equipment for what you do, and also choosing the equipment for that job you're gonna do. Make sure it's good enough, but make sure it's not so good that you're kind of almost afraid to use it, or you've spent more money than you're going to make. Because that's a bad feeling too. If you get a gig and you spend more money to do that gig than you're going to make, it doesn't really make sense, does it? It never does.
Exactly.
Right.
Going back to Seriatone, or however you want to say it, out of the multiple amps I've ever owned, I never owned a Seriatone, but I almost ordered one. Because you can buy them as kits, and you can solder them and put all the pieces together yourself, which I never
Wow.
really fully trusted myself to do that
I
because I
wouldn't do
wanted to stay alive and not electrocute myself or anything.
that.
I felt like that was more important than having sweet tone. You're just staying alive, right? So I never really dived into the whole kit, pedal amp thing. But looking around the website, it's probably 10 years ago when I was doing all this. The creme brulee amp, I think it was like a Trainwreck or Dr. Z-esque type thing. It was like a
Yeah.
small little head with very, very simple controls on it. And I came really close. I came really close to buying one, but I just never pulled the trigger. But if you're into doing DIY, amp kit type stuff, also I think there's a guy named he does pedal clones for like clones and stuff, the Rocky repaired amp. He does amp build kits, I think.
I wouldn't. I'm not good at DIY anyway, and I want the
Yeah.
thing. That's why I was looking at Dr. Z. Like everyone says, yeah, they're really well made, they're really robust, they're bulletproof. So but then again, that's why I want the backup. So my rig would be this then. I mean, actually wasn't going to discuss my actual rig today, but as I'm kind of thinking about this in a minute, I will. So the quad cortex, because it does sound, I do like it. I love the interface. I love the size, most importantly, and I've been very happy with it since I got it. And also, it's also got a mic input. So again, I think backups are really important. Like if my mixer went down and I was running the sound, I could potentially run both vocal for the two singers. I could run the two mics into the quad cortex and the guitar and the bass and run at least those four things through the PA. So there's one backup.
That's
into
cool.
into the Supro you mentioned, because the price is good and the other features are nice too. That's also a backup. And then the Fly Rig, which I really am not a huge fan of. I actually think it sounds pretty good direct with the cleans, but the distortions on that thing are analog distortions through, not even through an impulse response, through analog emulation. I don't think it sounds that good personally, but it would get me through. That's my third backup. So what you've got there is a very compact rig with a bunch of different backup solutions. And then I would hope that at home I'd also enjoy the tone enough in the apartment to let that be my only rig as well. And if not, I guess I would get something like a really nice tube amp and run it through the aux box and just have that. But that is kind of where I'm at. And then trying not to be sucked into the whole, there's a new fractal and it's even better than the last one. And there's a new helix and it sounds even more like a tube amp. And there's a new head, that it's so easy to get drawn into the latest and greatest as well. And there's, like I said at the start of this video, there's so many options. I didn't even mention the fact that there's some really good plugins on the phones. Like THU. I was listening to Steve from Boston the other night. He was playing THU, and that sounds great. And I've got that on my phone. I can use that on my phone, and it sounds really cool. Good. It's like having the Kemper in your phone. Yeah, so that's another backup.
I think there's a very real thing online called the fear of missing out.
Yeah, FOMO.
And that's why we have Facebook groups and gear page forums and different stuff. Because you get something and you see like, oh, 20,000 other people have it. I'm part of the cool group now, right? And then the new thing comes out and you go to that one because it's not really about being cool. I mean, I get it, it's not, but we get that feeling of excitement when we're a part of something that thousands of other
Yeah,
people
yeah,
have.
yeah,
So whether it's the Fractal or the QC or the Kemper or the, whatever head rush option you have, it's like you find this little community, this little bubbles of people that have the exact same you have, and you feel connected now. But that
yeah.
fear of missing out is very, very real. It's the same thing with gas. You want the latest, greatest thing, so, and almost immediately when you see something new, what you currently have is not good enough.
Well, in your
It was good enough
mind,
yesterday,
watch out for
but today
marketing.
it's
Watch
different.
out for marketing as well, and in your own head, because your own head, you can think, oh, that does this, and they're saying that sounds better on that than on mine. So it's gonna, and you start to imagine in your head it's gonna sound this way, but then when you
Mm-hmm.
actually get it, it doesn't sound any better or any different or any, and maybe it
Same.
introduces a new problem. The
Right.
Quad Cortex came out, there was no looper. So, okay, I got this great new compact pedal with XLRs, but there's no looper. Now they've added the
Right.
looper, and I've got to say it's very, very good, and that's great. But there's more stuff they could add to it now, where like the Helix is more. I mean, the Kemper's a great example. It's been around for years, and it's really mature, and it doesn't do everything that the Quad Cortex does, but it does what it sets out to do extremely well, and it's tried and
Right.
tested. So,
Right.
I missed Robert. If you're still here, you made a point. I'll never carry an amp again to a gig. But my question then is, where do you play and what do you take to a gig? That'd be good information.
Uh, Robert Akins. I think that was on
Yeah,
my chat. Maybe.
Robert Atkins. Yeah, I think I see everything here. Rick said the two tunes I sent yesterday were powered by Marshall. So yeah, I'll check those out later, Rick. I got your email. Thank you. BMO only plays at home. I don't record or play for an audience ever. So again, that's very different, isn't it? If you're playing at home only. Todd says a modeler has unlimited sounds. Your amp has a few. I'm guilty of that. Constantly switching, never ending. Well, that's another reason why sometimes I like to just have an amp with like 3 channels. I don't know why more companies don't make a tube amp with 3 really good channels, because for me that's all I need.
Yeah.
That and a delay pedal and a clean boost, which like the Mesa amps have that. They have like a clean boost, an EQ, 2 or 3 channels, and that gives you all those, really enough options to do a gig with. I don't know why more companies don't make those things.
Yeah.
Oh, Robert said some amps like the Engel Fireball, you can use a DI with an amp sim or use a real cab. Yeah, you know what's interesting? Like I'd like to try one, but as big is the Rev Generator 120 Mark III, because it's 120 watts. It's got 3 or 4 channels. It's got reverb. It's got noise gate. It's got the line out with the IRs that you can edit on your iPad. That's a true hybrid, but it's a big, full size, massive or oversized head. So again, it's not really what I'm looking for, considering sometimes I might want to take a train to a gig. So that's not even an option for me. Again, it's not worth me looking at those because it's not going to be practical for what I want.
And they have the D20 or G20 like little mini lunchbox heads.
Yeah, but again, I find that I find that a bit of a compromise. And it's a head. I still need the cab, so then I've got to take the head and the cab, right? Lisa says, much of what you've said has gone right over my head. Don't worry, Lisa. This is like 10 years of us two researching all these things. And I really think you don't need to understand all this stuff. If you've got something that works for you, then don't even go down these rabbit holes. Just stay where you are. But she said, I need to make the move from tube amp. Oh, a Mark 535. Now that's a good amp. And I actually was considering that myself as well. It's a quiet noodling. Well, Lisa, my advice is do not get rid of that Mark 535. That's a great amp. I would actually pair it. I mean, if budget wasn't an option, I would pair it with the Oxbox. I think you'd be incredibly happy. But that Oxbox is, it's not cheap. So I've tried the 2-Notes Captor X. That's very good. Something like that I would do. I would do the hybrid. I would not get rid of the Mark 535. That amp actually has a direct out as well. It's a cab clone, which is okay, but I would not get rid of the amp. I would keep the amp and get something. I would save up for the Oxbox. I think it's that good. But what would you do, Doc?
I would definitely keep the head if you can. I mean, if you don't need it to pay for bills or food or anything, if you have a great tube amp, keep it by all means.
Yeah.
Especially if it has Mezza Boogie on the faceplate. I mean, that is a great amp. You cannot go wrong. You'll be very happy keeping that amp for a very long time. If the aux box is out of your price range, There's a new Headrush MX5 that's very, very small. Has a nice small touchscreen with built-in expression pedal. I think now they're $400, maybe 500. I think the price went up a little bit, but even still, if you just want if you just want to plug in your headphones into the back and just noodle at night, I mean, it is a good option. They have all the Mesa Boogie amps and Saldanios and Danios, whatever it is. And getting a very basic small mauler. I know there's a uh, some Mooer options out there.
Again, there's a
Just
million, right? There's a million.
yeah, just pick your price range and then find something that's within that price range. And just know when you play through it, it sounds good enough for noodling, but you still have your Mesa Boogie Mark, 5 that's still there. You need to go out and play live gigs or get louder in the room if you want to.
I think I would get the Oxbox or some of those neural plugins for me are a bit hit and miss, but I really like the John. I've got the John Petrucci one, and I think that sounds really good. So I might get, if I've got an interface for the computer, you need an interface as well. I would get something like that. But yeah, I would say just keep using the amp myself.
Now she didn't say if she was playing into a computer or not, but everyone has a computer pretty much nowadays, and I think going the plug-in route is a really good option. It really is.
It is, but I'm worried she's so used to playing the real amp, it might be a bit of a shock, like we spoke about that difference.
Yeah, but if you got headphones on and you're just noodling, it sounds great for noodling.
Yeah, I would say give it time. Like I said at the start of the video, it took me a long time to get used to the in-ears. So definitely don't just put. The danger is you'll put headphones on, play through some kind of box into the computer or whatever, and just be like, I don't like it. But you really have to. I think. Well, I had to get used to it. And now I'm okay with it. I quite enjoy it now.
After having the Helix native plugin, which I think sounds really good. It did sound really, really good. In the last week, I have picked up the Amplitude 5 plugin, and it has all the pedals you'd ever want, all the amps you'd ever want, and I've done a few tracks already with it, and my goodness, it sounds great.
Yeah, I want to try that. Amplitude 5, right? See, another option.
Yeah, but that's a computer-based, plug your guitar into an interface. You also have iRig, IK Multimedia has the iRig little setup. You can just plug your guitar straight in, connect it to an iPad or a phone or a computer, and just run everything through this Amplitude software. And it's really amazing.
I like Helix Native for the fact it's an all-in-one, but I don't like that it's not standalone. You have to run it in a DAW. She might not have a DAW, the digital audio workstation. And I don't like the cab emulations, but you can just buy the IRs. I know you've got your own IRs. I also really like the York Audio IRs. They all sound really good to me. I think that can help.
What I like about the Amplitude is there's like a cab in a room kind of look. You can change the width of the microphones, and you can dial in the dry versus the wet sound. So if you want that depth in your ears, this does a really good job at doing.
I'm going to try it. I'm sure they have a demo, right? Like whatever you get, Lisa, get one. If you try these ones, get one with if you're doing plugins, get one with a trial period. Make sure you download it and test it, and you're happy with the sounds you're getting. If you're going to buy a pedal like the MX5 or I really like the Quad Cortex, but again, that is not a cheap pedal, and they're very hard to find at the moment. But get one from Sweetwater or somewhere with a really good return policy, or Guitar Center, somewhere you can return to, because don't get something and then if you get something with a fractal and then you got a week, I'm not sure what the return policy is, but if you buy one, I guess you could buy used because you could resell it, but I would get one with this really good return policy and really sit down, get it on a weekend when you're off, and you can actually sit down and really try it and make sure it's the right decision for you. Right. Robert says, do you think that's the future of amps, to have both IRs and a real cab? I think it's nice, Robert, but the thing is, don't forget, once you've added that IR loader to an amp, what if a new technology comes out the next year? Your amp then has that older technology in it. So I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, that's definitely the FOMO thing. I mean, if it works yesterday, just because you see something new doesn't mean it doesn't work today. It still works the exact same today.
You should work for Apple. That's what they told me when I complained about my old laptop as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's new technologies always coming out, and things will constantly get better and better and better. Uh, but as long as it's not like 10 years old or anything, I mean, something you got last year is still going to sound and work just fine for your needs today.
David recommended the Captor X. I've got a video on I've still got a Captor X here. I was going to compare it to the Oxbox. The only thing about the Captor X is there's an 8 ohm and a 16 ohm version, which I found annoying. Like,
Yeah.
if you buy both of those, you're getting close to the price of an Oxbox. But most tube amps are 8 ohms. So you
Correct, yeah.
just get that one. And I think you can use it with any amp anyway. It's just like a technical kind of thing.
And
But
some will have an 8 ohm output and a 16 ohm output, so you do have the option to choose one or the other.
I used to have the Synergy combo that was only 16 ohm.
Oh, okay.
And that's why my Captor X is 16 ohm. So if I'm going to use it, I don't have that amp anymore. So if I'm going to use that with my other amp, I mean, I don't think it's a problem as such. It's just not optimal. I wish there was a switch on that thing. That's for me. That's the biggest drawback of that box. The aux can do 4, 8, or 16, which is really, really nice.
What's that new Boss IR pedal that has like the amp sim and the IR like in one thing?
Yeah, there's another one.
That's a good little $400 or $500 option, right?
That's the thing we started with. It's another option. So yes, again, there's also the Boss Tube Amp Expander. That's another one that you can get.
Yep.
The 2-note Captor X is the smallest and most budget friendly, and the one that you can take to your gig with you as well. So I would, and as your amp is 8 ohm, I'd probably recommend that, or at least again, get it and try it and make sure you like it. It's got a kind of attenuator in there as well. Make sure, but again, make sure you like it, because there's so many options out there. Rick says tube amps push more air. As for recording, much more dynamic. Lisa says the Mesa already has headphones. That's right. It's actually got a DI in anyway. It's got the cab clone, which isn't. I think the original version people used to hate on, but I think the latest ones are okay. But it says nowhere near the same. Yeah, it's not as good as like an impulse response for sure. Todd said just run a Helix into any powered speaker. Yeah, I mean I told you I've done it a couple of gigs. I've actually got a video of that I'm going to start using to get some wedding work. It did the job. It did, but I didn't. It didn't, and I wasn't using. I'm very big on that thing. I think you need to use. I need to use impulse responses, not the stock cabs. I will just say this: I could go and use it tonight and get through the gig, and everyone will have a great time. But I just like having. I like having the tube amp behind me, and also that is a big pedal now. Notice how a lot of the modelers have shrunk down, like the original Head Rush and the original Helix Floor, and now the Quad Cortex and the FM9. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are going for the smaller units now, and that's important to me because although I do have a car, I often take the subway to gigs.
Here's the gig board, which is half the size. I think it's probably about the same size as a Quad Cortex, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just with less switches, obviously.
But then you've got less switches. That's the thing for me.
Yeah.
I missed one. I keep thinking they just keep coming to my brain like this. I mean, there's the Spark Mini was announced a few weeks ago. Like, there's another one. Like,
I did order that.
Yeah, I did too. But that's $190 battery powered amp that you can take on vacation. Use the Bluetooth speaker. That's
right.
I think that's a bit of a different thing. But the Spark amp is another one that a lot of people talk about.
I'm gonna use it for my my private lessons for my students to plug into.
Yeah,
it's just a good little amp they can plug into, and it sounds great in the room, and it works.
Lisa had a THR. Yep. I hear good things about those as well. Rick likes to use two 15-watt tube amps A-B. That'd be a nice... two amps on stage would be even better. What's better than a tube amp on stage? 2 tube amps on stage.
Three tube amps. You got your clean, your crunch, and your lead. You got them all lined up on the stage there.
they're saying a lot of bands here are now using Quad Cortex and Kemper. Yeah, they are. But I went to see John Mayer a few weeks ago, and they all had tube amps on stage. So, it depends what kind of music you play as well.
Yeah.
Just going through I'm just catching up on the chat. Thanks for the tips. You're welcome. I've heard many Kemper users say they only use a couple settings. Why spend all that money for something you're going to use? Now, that's a good point too, Jeffrey, because the real thing earlier, he's told me that on his Kemper, he bought it used, he loaded in his 4 sounds and never touched it again. But I still think that was a great investment because he bought it used and he's got a rig there which is portable with 4 different amps in it. And that's still a great saving if you think about what it's replacing.
Right.
And I also think the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, with this gear is spend more time tweaking it than using it. And I've been very guilty of that. I'm kind of getting over all that now. Spent a lot of time looking for the missing link, the hidden tweaks that unlock the full potential, and the MIDI controllers and all these MIDI settings and using apps with them. I just want a good sound now. I just want a couple of good sounds. And if you can get that from the Kemper and never touch it again, that's great. For me, the danger is to keep looking at new profiles. Again, fear of missing out, right? Is there something better? Mark was on the TV last night, but I couldn't watch it. I hope to see that tomorrow soon. I don't have Gary. So Gary, check out his channel. He has a few very nice guitars and very nice amps, and he also gets other amps and guitars in to demo. And he does it. I think he uses his phone to do it, but you can hear that he's in the room and he's really getting into the feel and the sound of the tube amp and his guitars. And I think for me, that's what I'm looking for, that connection. And not to knock anyone that wants to make the videos and do all these tutorials and things, but I just did it for a while, and I don't want to do that anymore. I just want stuff that sounds good, and that's why I like the Quad Cortex. You don't need really. I've made some videos on how to use it. You don't need them. You just open it up, you update it, you stick in an amp in the cab, and you play, and the tone is good. And for me, that's really cool. And that's what Gary says. I don't have the patience for all the software configurations and the complex pedals. Less is more. And I do agree with that. On the flip side, sometimes I'll be playing a tube amp and wish there was a bit more 2K or something, and I can't add it in because I need to add an EQ pedal. So that's not always perfect, but if you can find the right amp for you, it's good.
What I've done here on the Amplitude plugin or software is that I have a Doc 800 Crunch, a Doc Maz Jr., a slow clean, a slow drive, and a slow lead, as in Saldana, whatever. So I just, when I first downloaded it, I was like, all right, I need some presets. So I'm not trying to go through every single option that there is. Because like Aaron wants, he wants a clean, a crunch, and a lead. What more do you want? What more do you need than that?
Well, I don't. But then some people want a different sound for every song, don't they?
Yeah, so, that's ridiculous.
Well, no. Like if you're in a What if you're in a cover band like Tribute to the '80s, and every song you want to exactly recreate and have it all changed from Logic via MIDI and backing tracks? I totally get that. That's just not my usage. My usage is clean, crunch, and heavy. Yeah.
I like to think of things as categories. So you can have a clean category, a crunch category, and a lead. Now within those, do you want a Fender clean or a Vox clean? Or do you want a Marshall lead or a Mesa Boogie lead? I mean, there's still some nuances in there, that you can kind of venture off. But as long as you have something in those 3 categories, it should keep your mind from straying and wondering too much about all the different options. Do you want an orange lead tone, or do you want a Dr. Z clean? It was like, is it clean? I mean, clean is a clean at some point.
Look, I like what Line 6 did with the Catalyst. They made their own clean. I said this to them at NAMM when I was there 2 years ago. I was like, will the new guitarists actually know what a Fender sounds like? Like someone who's playing guitar tomorrow and never been out to a guitar store and just plugs in and starts on their computer and YouTube. Will they even know what a Soldano drive is? So I like the fact on their new amp, and I think Boss did this too. They've made their own clean for that amp. They've made their own drive for that amp, their own high gain for that amp. I think that's really, really smart of them. And I like that amp, but I'm not going to keep. I got one. I'm not going to keep it because I don't like the power amp in on it with the modeler, and that's why I'm going to go for the the tube amp one. But if I just wanted a standalone amp, I think that's a really good option. Look, Real Ting says, I've not found an issue to play Kemper with a guitarist with an amp. Generally, we'd mic them up anyway. Though since my tinnitus has gotten worse, I try not to play too loud anyway. Not worth it. So yeah, okay. But again, that probably depends on the size of the stage as well, doesn't it? Because if they're miking them up and how, I don't know. Look, I did a wedding band last summer. There was like a 13-piece, and the sound was so loud, it was ridiculous. I had the earplugs in, it was still too loud. Honestly, I didn't really hear the amp on the stage anyway because it was so stupidly loud. So that factors in as well. Who's running your sound? Who are they favoring? How loud are they running it? Is it too loud? There's so many other factors that go into all this that we didn't even touch upon.
Right.
Why not spend $2,000 on 2 Kemper sounds? If those 2 sounds do the job in a lightweight, easy to use package, I mean, lots of people spend $5,000 on a Martin to play 3 chords. Are you talking about me, Real Ting? Now, what's wrong with me playing? No, hang on. What's wrong with me playing 3 chords? Huh?
Wow.
Quilter are awesome. Wrath Band uses those. I work some shows, they're pedalboard, but venue supply cabs and mic them. David, I think Valve Train amplification makes a tube-powered cab for use of modders. Right, they do. But my problem with that is it's expensive and it's heavy. So I feel like if you're going to get a 50-watt tube amp just for amplifying your modeler, you may as well just get a 50-pound amp in the first place and just use the power amp input. That's my opinion on that stuff. Or just use an amp in the first place, right?
I played the Valve Train at the Summer NAMM.
I know. I wish I had. How was it good?
It felt great. It did. But in the back of my mind the whole time, I was like, I can do the same thing with an effects return or a power amp in of a tube amp.
Exactly. Yeah. If that thing's like 50 pounds, so why not just get a 3-channel 50-pound combo and use that with an effects board, right?
Well, I feel like it was $1,400.
Yeah.
So the price point didn't justify it for me.
Most gear buyers are casual players who do it for fun and because they like playing and enjoying equipment. I guess I'm a different category as my job, so they're tools. But there's also people that only play at home, Real Ting, that want to spend a lot of money on a $5,000 Martin to play 3 chords, and that's fine too. I got my own back. My bass rig is an Ampeg SVT. I don't know much about bass, I must admit. I feel like with bass, you can just pretty much plug in direct to the PA and get a good sound, though. Like
pretty much.
You don't need the gain and stuff as much.
That's why a lot of these modelers don't have lots of bass amp options. Because if you have a SVT head and an 8x10 modeled cab and whatever microphones, I mean, bass is gonna sound great. No matter what you do.
Todd says, my personal rig is an 11 rack into a small crown amp in a 3 rack case, about 15 pounds, into a 2x12 cab. We've almost come full circle. Yeah, that can happen too. But it's flexible, I guess.
Yeah.
Get the best you can afford. See, I think like that too. So I want to get something that's just really good. And that's why what I do though with my guitars and my amps, I want to just get a few things that are really expensive and really good and really enjoy them and use them. At the same time, I don't want to get stuff that's so stupidly expensive. If I go to like $100 gig, not that's a bad example. I wouldn't do a $100 gig. Even if I got a wedding that paid $500, it's not worth taking a 10 grand rig to it, is it? It's just too much risk, like you said earlier. Rick is obsessed with me getting 2 amps on that stage. I guess, I mean, if it weighs 28 pounds, you almost could, to be fair.
That is an option for sure.
And a tweed. Also, the best can mean different things. For me, 1 trip load in, 3 minutes setup, super light gear, easy to fit in the car with a full PA, reliable, easy to use, and sounds great. You see, he does the same. He takes the PA as well. So that really changes things. I believe if I only played guitar and didn't take PA, I'd have much less problems taking like a stack and a big effect pedal board. I wouldn't mind as much. For me, it's really when you're taking the PA as well. I mean, you know, portable is always a nice thing, isn't it? As long as it still sounds good.
Definitely convenient.
Todd started playing late 80s, but now I still play and run sound for bands. Then my wife is called the investment in the business. That's the key.
Yeah.
Oh, Zane is here. Good evening, Aaron, Dr. McFarland, everyone from the UK. It's late there, buddy. Real Ting went with the Black Star Silverline amp. Not too heavy, has reverb and delay built in. That's cool. 6 different tube simulations. So a solid state or digital. But yeah, that's a good option. If you like that thing with the solid state, that's a good way to go. If I like the solid state amps, I would definitely go with them because I think that's convenient. Because tubes can also go wrong, right? When you're at a gig, they can fail. There's no investment on this, says Todd. If you are really good at your hobby, you might get 1% back. Well, that's true too. You know, it's a lot of musicians spend way more than they will earn from the equipment.
A business, you invest in businesses and the ways to make money. You're not really investing if you're just playing at the house. I wouldn't think of it that way. But it's no different than going out and buying a Camaro because you like cars. It's like, all right, so if you like really expensive tube amps and high-end guitars and pedals, then it's no different than going out buying a car or anything else that you like.
Yeah.
You're going to spend your money on something. So
I agree. You, like YouTube and the music is my, the music especially is my career, but I also treat it as a kind of hobby as well because I enjoy it. It's getting harder and harder, of course, with the way things are these days, but Padded Pedal Room is here. Hi, Doc. Hi, Aaron. And hi, everybody. Good to see you, buddy.
What's up?
Oh, here we go. I'm Malaysian, and this word is pronounced Chariatone. Chariatone. I have their OTS 20 Dumble clone. Oh, nice. Yeah, they basically make they make tributes to, I won't say copies, tributes to existing famous amps. So let's remember this, Doc. Chariatone. Chariatone. I heard chariatone. That's why it was in my head. But it's chariatone. So you learn something here every time. I was thinking this earlier, David. A musician, someone who loads $5,000 worth of gear into a $500 car to drive 100 miles to a $50 gig, and we love it.
Yes.
Or even worse, like $10,000 worth of gear into a $25,000 car to drive 150 miles to a $100 gig. It's even worse, right?
Yeah.
Lee says you're rich if you got a $500 car. Rick went through a lot of amps. I think we all went through a lot of gear, Rick. It's even hard now with YouTube is good because you can hear stuff. It's also bad because you might buy more stuff because you're exposed to more stuff. Danielle likes the Michael Kelly Rick Turner N6 semi-hollow nylon string. Often debate if I should get a small acoustic amp to use with that guitar. Yeah, I think you should. Acoustic amps are a different ball game, but yeah, why not? Take a Spark amp, says Zane. Some people do. Some people have been plugging the headphone out of the Spark amp into the PA and using that for gigs. Real Ting says, here's another thing. When I want a new tone, I generally select a profile I like, dial it in the way I like it, maybe reverb and delay, takes a minute, and usually sit and play for hours. So that's good. Yeah, that's the whole thing of profiling versus modeling as well. That's another debate to have. You know, with the Axe Effect stuff, you can turn off the power amp modeling because everything is modeled from the whole chain. You can turn off the power amp modeling so it's not doubled in your power amp and the tube amp. Whereas with something like the Quad Cortex, I'm not sure about the Head Rush. I think it's the same. You're putting the amp model, including the power amp modeling, into another power amp source. So that's something cool that Fract will do. But does it make a big enough difference to worry about it? It's up to the user, I guess. With the Rev, Derek can put your name and signature on the front of the combo. So if someone nicks it, you're covered. Real Ting obviously likes the Kemper a lot. What do you think of the new Boss RE202? I haven't played that one. The RE2, is that the one you were talking about earlier?
Boss RE.
Hang on, I'm bringing it up.
It's not the space pedal, right?
Oh, Space Echo. It's a Space Echo.
Space Echo.
Yeah. You know, I think with that, Line 6 also re-released the DL4 last week. I'm like, well, it's all cool for nostalgia and everything, but if you're going to spend $400 on that, why don't you just get the HX Stomp, which I think is a really good pedal? Why not just get that one, right? There's a lot of rehashes lately with gear, like re-releasing the same thing. I guess that's been done for years, but I'm seeing it more and more now. Like stuff is brought out and then split into smaller things and re-released over and over and over again.
I recently got the Hoof Reaper Octave from Earthquaker Devices, is the fuzz pedal. And I've probably bought and sold that pedal more times than I'd like to say here on the live stream. But I got it because I just really missed that pedal. So I probably spent way too much, and I probably shouldn't have. But it's like, hey, no, I have a great fuzz pedal for someone who wants to come into the studio and just plug in and maybe go through the Super amp and get a tone that way. So something is nostalgic.
I misread Real Ting. He's clarifying here. I'm saying if people want to spend money on the Kemper or Martin, go for it. Doesn't matter if you use 3 sounds or 3 chords. Okay, good. I take it back then, because I don't know more than 3 chords. I was told that 3 chords is all you need for rock and roll. Is that true, Doc?
Pretty much.
Okay, so I'm just to clarify.
And you have to have the truth as well.
Oh, and the truth. That's what I'm missing. Yeah, the truth. Yeah. I find my main goal when playing with others is to hear every note on the guitar clearly with reasonable sustain and dynamics. I find playing with tone too much is often at odds with that main goal. Yeah, good point. And that's why I go back to the source of liking that tube amp, because it gives me that kind of richness to the tone that it jumps out a bit more to me, and I like that. And Bimo says Charlie Watts owned a Mercedes and didn't even drive. Yeah, Noel Gallagher too. I want to say thank you to Rosanna. We've had a few trolls in here today, and she's been an expert at getting rid of those trolls. So thank you, Rosanna. You've worked very hard today. I hope that Lee makes you a nice meal tonight to thank you on my behalf. So I'll give you a round of applause for doing that. Yeah.
Nice.
Have we come to any conclusions? Well, I think my conclusion is I'm going to try that amp that you recommended, which that wasn't my intention today at all. I've got a pattern here, Doc. I'm having guests on each week on the Mondays at 4 o'clock, and every time there's a guest on, it makes me want to buy something, because they come on here and they say, "Oh, have you tried this one?" Or "I just saw this one," and I start looking. This is not a good idea, but that amp you show me is interesting. I think I'm going to try that one, because Sweetwater do have a good return policy, and they've also got that used one as well, which would be a good way to do it.
Yeah, it's a good deal.
So if I try that one, and if I really don't bond with it, I can go back to my original idea of getting the Dr. Z, which I'm sure is a really killer amp too. But yeah, that looks like a good thing to try.
And you also mentioned the Supersonic, the Fender Supersonic.
Yes, I'm interested in that, but that thing is actually quite wide. It's quite bulky.
Yeah,
and
it's big.
I'm looking for, I'm looking for I want compact. I want to take a PA and a small mixer and a small board and a small, I want everything to be very compact, all fit on. Oh, by the way, those gear carts are really awesome. You know what I'm talking about? They're actually not that cheap, but they're really, really awesome. The rock and roller carts. So I want a rock and roller cart, which I have, and my plan is to fit on that the whole rig, tie it around with a pull tie, big rope, and take it out the car and go. I don't want to be dealing with bulky stuff that can. And I don't want to have to take like 2 trips to the car and big bulky stuff. So my plan is to keep stuff compact for this, and then have a different rig at home. Like I've got tube amp and the aux box at home anyway, so it's fine.
Yeah. The size of the Supersonic is very much the same as a Fender Deluxe.
Yeah.
And at $1,500 for me, that's to me that's out of my price range. If it's not between 5 and 1,000, I don't want it.
I like this because it has the buffered effects loop. It has 2 channels and reverb if it needs to be a backup. And people rave about these amps. They say they're really, really good. But you're right. It's $1,600. It's not small. It's still pretty wide. The weight is 40 pounds, which is okay. It's 22 watts. Not that powerful for the price. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think it's really, really cool, but it's still not. I don't think it'd be my be and end all. So again,
Yeah.
what we said at the start of the show was, what do you actually need? So you see, it's very easy to get distracted from what you actually need. So my whole thing was, I want to use the Quad Cortex and put it into a power amp and cab. I don't need the amp to have 2 channels, reverb, and the other stuff. I need a tube amp that's a decent price, that doesn't matter if it gets scratched, that I can plug the thing into and amplify the sound. I don't need anything else. Although I do think it's cool with the Fender, because on stage it'll say Fender and it'll look very traditional, even though you're using a Quad Cortex. I think that's a cool thing. Some people care about that stuff, don't they? Like what it says on the amp and that kind of thing. But yeah, I considered that, but you're right. $1,600, it's like, 22 watts. That's almost as expensive as the Dr. Z, which is 30 watts and more compact. So yeah, I mean, we're certainly not short of options, are we?
Definitely not.
So what we do with the larger power, start with the 3 chords. I'd get a Tone Master. See, Tone Master is another thing I wanted to try. And the guest from the other week was Audio Mo Music. He just got one and he says it's good. But then he also did a review. I don't think he'll mind me saying this. He also reviewed a really nice PRS this week, and he made a statement at the start. Well, that's what he said at the start of his video. He said, I'm not going to demo this wonderful guitar through the Tone Master. I'm going to play it through my Mesa tube amp. That's what he said. So there we go. You know, I'm sure they're really great too, and they're really light. They're like 20 pounds, but they're still a solid state amp with a single channel. And you know, I think they messed up with the Tone Masters. They didn't put a power amp input.
They should have.
Yeah. Can you imagine using something like your favorite modeler into that? So on the stage, the audience thinks you're playing a Fender Twin, but you're not. That would be so cool. I can't believe they didn't put a power amp input on it.
If Fender is listening, go ahead and change your blueprints to include a power amp in.
Well, the cynical side of me thinks they might do in the next one. That might be the next update. Oh, the new one has a power amp input, and then all the modeling people will go out and buy one as well. Maybe that will happen. But you know what? Being completely honest, it's still not a tube amp. I do think I talk a lot on here on the channel about like psychology. For me, there's always that thing of, no matter how good it is, even if I do think it's great, I think my brain is always going to think that the tube amp is better anyway. And I think that's why I want to get tube amp to do this and have the convenience of the modeling for everything else. So that's just me.
The Tone Master is too close in price to the tube option, the tube version. And I would get a Tone Master if it was like $500, but at $899, $999, you can just get the tube amp version for another $200. Now, obviously, the weight is way less.
I love the kickstand too. The kickstand is nice.
Kickstand's cool. I mean, it looks classic. It really does.
Look at this. Look, that is cool.
But for the price, I would like to have those in the $500 to $600 range, and not the $1,000 range.
£33 though. Yeah, £33, and I played them at Guitar Center. I did like them, but my fear again is in the back of my mind I'll be thinking, well, yeah, but it's solid state, and maybe I won't like. And there's no power amp input anyway, so that's completely off my list. For me, it's the Dr. Z, or the one you showed me. Again, size, and again, I can easily talk myself out of it. Oh, I could get the Supersonic because it's only a few inches wider. It's fine. But then you get it, and then it comes time for the gig, and it doesn't quite fit in the car. So I think what I said at the start of the video is really important. Write down what you actually need, and then don't deviate from it, because it's so easy to think, oh, well, I'll just get that one with the passive loop, and I'll just add a buffer, and that one's got this bigger, that's fine, I can fit it in the back seat. No, stick with what you need. The good thing about having all these options today is that you can get pretty much anything you need, because there's so many options. It's kind of nuts.
When I played at church this past Sunday, I had my Gator Cases guitar bag, and I fit the Headrush MX5 in the little pocket there with my cables. I just walked in with one case. It was great.
I tried the MX5. I thought it was too small for me. It was too small.
Yeah, it is.
And that's the That's the other thing. I wish in 2022 all these digital products had an app on the phone and the iPad, and a lot of them don't. Actually, the funny thing is, the Kemper Stage has an iPad app, but the Quad Cortex, the Head Rush, the Helix, they don't have an iPad app. It's 2022. I don't get it.
Yeah.
So
Didn't they have a Bluetooth option like even 10 years ago?
No, they had
just
when they launched the Stage, they had the Wi-Fi chip hidden, and then they unlocked it with firmware. So the funny thing is, a lot of people say Kemper's old and you should sell it and get the Quad Cortex, but the Kemper is the one that has the app. So they've been really good at supporting the product. Companies like Fractal are releasing like a new version every year or two. It's getting crazy. I like that they've stood by the product. At the same time, the product is looking dated now, and the Quad Cortex looks much more modern, to be fair. But why don't they all have apps now? It's kind of annoying to me. He's going to get a second-hand Tone Master. The thing is, by the time you get one, Real Ting, the price of that second-hand Tone Master will be what the price of the new one was 2 years ago, because the prices right now are just going up, 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 up. Right?
Right.
Almost feels like they go up every week almost. But Padded Pedal Room has the MX5 as well and likes it. So that's good. Whatever works for you. And he says the Kemper Stage iPad app is great. It's a game changer. I mean, the thing is, the Quad Cortex and the Head Rush have these lovely touch screens, but who wants to bend down while you're playing to make an adjustment?
That's the biggest argument, and why people scream at Head Rush to make some kind of desktop editor. Is I don't want to have to bend down all the time just to edit stuff.
I agree. It seems ridiculous. Like, they should all have, in my opinion, the computer editor and mobile editors as well. Like that. The funny thing is, the Catalyst has an iPad app, but it's not wireless. You have to plug it in with the cable, but it has an iPad app, and the Helix doesn't. The Helix is the flagship product, and it doesn't have an app. It has a desktop editor, but they put one in the Catalyst. So why can't they put one in the Helix? I don't know. I'm kind of ranting a bit now, but the fact is, when you're doing a gig and you've got your iPad with the lyrics, doesn't it make sense to have your controls for your amp on there as well? Isn't that like what the whole appeal of these digital options that is up there on the iPad? So I'm really, 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 really disappointed to hear that the Quad Cortex is not going to get one. They're going to make a desktop editor, but they're not going to make an iPad app, and that's really, really annoying. I mean, it's 2022, so.
Hold on, where's my camera? Huge fail, Quad Cortex.
I'll give it one of these. Hang on. I mean, to be fair though, when I'm playing at a gig, I seldom do tweak sounds. I usually just, if you get them right, they're usually good to go. But it's nice to have the option, especially when you first get the product. That was a boo.
Yeah, there's 2 times I had to bend down at church and kind of move some things on the screen. But once I had everything set, I was good.
Look, this guy's just coming to brag. Look, I have split screen on the large iPad Pro, lyrics on half the screen, and the Kemper app on the other half of the screen. Wow. No, it's a great point. Isn't the whole point of the digital to be more convenient and therefore have the iPad app? So why don't they all have them? What happened with Head Rush? I thought I heard talk of them making a desktop editor.
I mean, people have been talking for a few years about it. Who knows? The year is young. That's all I'm going to say.
Maybe there'll be a new model that has, perhaps they'll save that for like the next one, you know?
Right.
But
Come
for
out
now,
with a new one with a Bluetooth chip and a Wi-Fi chip and different options. Oh, something. Who knows?
It's a
Who
selling
knows
point.
what's happening?
It's a selling point. Like if they brought out a new Quad Cortex that had the mobile editor, I would probably want to sell mine and get the new one. So it's going to be a selling point, I think, as well for some companies. But for now, I'll give it one of these. Okay. So what have we what have we learned today, Doc? I knew, and I said at the start of the video, there is not an answer to this because there's too many options, there's too many scenarios, and even if you think you know what you want, you might have to go through a few rigs like we have. We've been through a lot of rigs. I know, I'm currently going through a lot still, and maybe I never will find the answer. Maybe that's why we started YouTube channels, because we have to keep documenting the journey. But I do think there's a few really good points we've raised today. Figure out your budget. Figure out exactly what kind of gig or situation and room you're using these in, and stick to that. And preferably try stuff. Go to Guitar Center, try it in person, get stuff from Sweetwater with a good return policy, and try it yourself. Like, watch all the YouTube videos, of course, but there's nothing like actually trying it. And try it in your band. That's what I wish I could do. I wanna, because my gigs are in the summer. I really want to get some musicians together soon and just try some of these things in the room. And I think for me, the minute I go, that's the sound, I'm done, because that is the sound, right? That's all I need.
Yeah, no looking back.
You can edit with the head rush with your feet, with the foot switches, without bending down. You can do that on Helix as well, but I never really enjoyed it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's not as fun.
I think it's a huge factor for Kemper users. We feel confident it won't be abandoned because it hasn't been. My toaster works better now than it did 8 years ago. Most others become a state. Well, the value they've given you is great with those 8 years of updates, but they will have to update it eventually because it doesn't do dual amps. It doesn't do a mic input. It hasn't got a USB audio interface. Yeah. So, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing or whatever, but they will have to make a new one eventually. I personally think Fractal make updates too much. I feel like there was the AxeFX, which is a great unit, AxeFX 3. Then there was the AxeFX 3 Mark 2, and then there was like the AxeFX 3 Mark 3 or something, all in the space of like 3 years. Although, like you said, it doesn't mean the old one works any worse. I bet Realteen could use that Kemper he's got for the rest of his life and be very happy with the tones, because it sounds like he's found what works for him. So that's cool.
Yeah, this Boss MS3 that I have, as far as I know, has never been an update for it. It's just you buy it once, you get the sounds that come with it, and that's it. And if the Kemper stopped being supported for some whatever reason, and you never plugged it into a computer to update it or whatever, I still think you would have all the functionality that you would need.
Yeah.
Just without ever having to update it ever again.
Because he's happy now, but he's saying the older one will still be supported. We don't know that, do we? I mean, for example, the Line 6 Pod HD is no longer supported.
That's probably a good thing.
Well, fair enough, fair enough. But I'm saying, like, the argument is with a tube amp. You buy a classic tube amp and you can play it forever, and when you go to sell it, it's still a classic, because it hasn't got the digital stuff in there. The Kemper will eventually be not supported anymore when they release the new one. It will happen. But I guess you can just keep using it on the current firmware. And the sounds are at a level now where you can just keep using them, and that's a good thing. As long as you don't get that fear of missing out you were talking about earlier, then you're fine.
It's rough, man. it's a bad disease.
Fear of missing out. FOMO. They call it FOMO. All right, let's wrap things up. I think it's been very useful. Hey, it's been useful to me, so I hope it's been useful to everyone that's watching. Dr. McFarland, where can people go to find out more about you and what you do?
I have a YouTube channel, Dr. McFarland Studios, here on YouTube, and drmcfarlandstudios.com. I'm here local to Nashville, so if you have a band that wants to come record in my studio, I'm always looking for new people to produce and engineer their albums. And if you want private lessons, I do that as well, either through Skype or in person. And I'm around. Find me on Instagram or Facebook Messenger. And I'm very open and approachable and love talking about gear and answering your questions. So come say hi.
Awesome.
And thanks, Aaron, for having me on.
No, thanks for joining me. Divided by Time Studios, do you think we'll see a Strymon multi-effects like Helix or Kemper? I'm surprised they haven't made one by now, because people love their stuff. I don't know why they haven't.
I'm looking at this Amplitude plugin, and I'm like, if they could just take these sounds and put it in a hardware version, that would be sick.
Yeah,
because this thing sounds really good.
I'm going to try that. Has that just been released?
No, it's been out for a while.
Amplitude. I'm going to try that one.
Well, they had Amplitude 4, and now they have 5. But yeah, I would go try it out,
because they have the free trials. So if they got the free trials, then try them. Make sure it works for you first of all. Thank you, David. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate it. Thank you, Padded Pillar Room. Appreciate it. And Poo Ninja's still rocking the 500X until it breaks. Hey, why not get the value from it, right?
Yeah.
Oh, he took great offense when we dissed the 500X. So that's what I use.
Man,
There we go.
I had one and I didn't keep it very long. That's all I'm going to say about that.
All right, let's wrap things up. Thanks for joining me. If you're new here, please subscribe and ring the bell. Oh, Poo Ninja's hiding up my advert. And live guest every Monday. I think I've got Thomas Blue coming on soon, which will be cool. But I mostly want to speak to him about strats, though, because he's the strat guy. Yeah, and strat king. I'm going to have different guests every Monday. I'm sure the doctor will be back to talk about a different topic at some point soon. And go and check out his channel if you've enjoyed this. Subscribe to mine if you've enjoyed it. Everyone watching on the doctor's channel, hi, nice to meet you. My name's Aaron Short. And again, thanks to Rosanna for dealing with the trolls. And everyone have a great night, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
See ya.
I just got to get rid of Poo Ninja's comment. Sorry, Poo. There we go. We'll see you next time. Have a great night. Take care. Be well. Bye-bye.